Hello, welcome to Family Business World. I'm your host, Dr. Dale Caldwell, and today we are going to learn a lot about solar power. Joe, I want to welcome you to the show. So Joe Gordon, who's the Director of Northeast Project Development for Sunvest Solar Inc., welcome to Family Business World.
Thank you so much, Dale. I can't tell you what a pleasure and honor it is to be here. I've seen so many of the segments and participate on the Family Business Fridays, so I'm so impressed with what you do and the Rothman Institute for the community and the family business community in New Jersey. So thank you for having me.
Well, Joe, it's been good to get to know you over the last few months and so on, and you're doing some really, really interesting things. So it's great that we finally get a chance to chat. And so I always say I wrote this book on influence, and so I always like people's origin stories. So tell me now, where did you grow up and how did you get into this thing called solar?
Yeah, thank you. I grew up in the Chicagoland area, so I've been in solar for 17 years.
Wow.
That's longer than most manufacturers actually have been in business.
Right.
But the way it evolved was I grew up in Chicago and went to Northern Illinois University.
Okay.
And I got a double degree in marketing and computer science, fairly removed from solar. But as I was selling computers and computer services, I got into computer recycling. And it was interesting. I started realizing that I really enjoyed and was intrigued by the recycling more than the computers. And around that time, my father, who was retired, was reading up on windmills in Holland and Denmark and solar farms in Germany. And he said, I can see you do something like this. So I looked into it and tried to read all I could. And I joined the Illinois Solar Energy Association, which is a local grassroots group that sort of instructs and talks about solar projects that we do. Back then, it was solar hot water. But one of the board members got up and talked about solar. He owned a solar company, and he was so charismatic and really did such a grounding of the financials of the solar. And he would say things like, if it was raining, and instead of raindrops, it was dollar bills falling down, would you get up on your roof and collect them? Because that's what's going on right now. Sunshine is falling on your roof.
Right.
Sunshine is energy, it's income. So wouldn't it be great if we could harvest that, collect it, and put it to use for you? And, energy is income, and we can turn your roof into income property. And instead of renting your energy, you could own it. So I started selling for him for about 13 years, did a lot of residential and some commercial. And now I've moved over to Sunvest, and I'm strictly commercial solar.
Well, so 17 years that's a lifetime in the solar industry. So you were early on. So people people know the basics, that the sun comes down and the solar panels hold it. But I think we have a graphic that we can show in a second on how does solar work? So let the audience know, how specifically does solar work? Walk us through the graphic.
It's a lot of questions. Yeah, I think this graphic will help. But so just want to give a quick definition. When we talk about solar, we typically talk about it in kilowatts installed. So, and yet it produces kilowatt hours. So how does that work? Well, a kilowatt of solar is it's an equipment term. It means you have three 350-watt panels that are wired together. And when 1 hour of sunlight strikes all three of those panels, or that 1 kilowatt array, you get 1 kilowatt hour out of it for your facility's use.
Interesting.
So, typically in New Jersey, a kilowatt of solar will provide and generate about 1,100 to 1,300 kilowatt hours per year for a facility's use.
Wow.
Okay. So what we do is the sunlight shines down on the panels, and it excites electrons that are in the chemicals that are coated on these wafers.
Right.
They generate a current, and we bring that current down. It's in DC, direct current, but then it will flow into inverters, which invert the stream to AC, and then it goes directly into the facility's main distribution panel.
Interesting.
So it terminates there, and the main panel will, if there's a load at the plant or the facility, it will use that energy immediately.
Wow.
But if there's any excess, in energy, I get asked that a lot. What if it generates more? Well, the system doesn't, your service doesn't need to know and track what's coming from the grid versus what's coming from the solar. It'll wind its way automatically through the meter and into the grid, where the utility in New Jersey will provide kilowatt hour credits. They won't give you cash, but they'll provide kilowatt hour credits for that energy that will roll like cell phone minutes from month to month to month until you use them all up, or until you hit your anniversary date of the annual anniversary date.
Wonderful. So if you have have it on your roof and you're collecting energy, how long does that energy stay there if you don't use it all? I mean, is there a shelf life that it'll disappear after a while, or does it stay in there for an indefinite period of time?
No, great question. So the panels degrade very slowly. The technology is so reliable. The panels actually have a warranty that says after 25 years, they still have 80 to 83% of the energy generating life left in the cells.
Wow.
So we're talking about something that's long lasting, but the energy that's generated, the facility will use the energy immediately because energy is like water. It goes to the point of least resistance. So you have loads at your plant or your home, and the energy goes to satisfy the loads. But ultimately, if it satisfies those loads and it's looking for somewhere to go, the grid represents to the solar an unlimited resource of where it could go. So it will flow out there. And now the policies are very important. And there's a few showstoppers that your viewers and the business owners need to be aware of to have solar. First of all, when that solar connects in with the main panel, that's something that in the chart, it says interconnection. Interconnection is a policy that all the New Jersey facilities follow. Think about it. This is energy that is from a variable source.
Right.
So what happens if we have all this solar in New Jersey and we get a cloud, and now it's generating energy for the business, and then we have a cloud or a storm cover coming.
Right.
All of a sudden now that plant needs the energy still, but it will actually put bigger stress on the grid.
Right.
So interconnection is a way for the utilities to track what is, they approve it. They have to approve a solar facility on any business or home. And then they track it all and make sure that the grid voltage can be stable and the solar can backfeed appropriately.
Interesting. Well, one of the reasons that we wanted to have you on the show is that, for family businesses where the margins are typically very, very, very thin. And so saving money and efficiencies are more important than ever for the family businesses. And solar has really become a way that many family and small and independent businesses have really been able to turn a profit. So talk to me about the relationship and the benefits for family businesses.
Yeah, so family businesses, let's be honest, they can invest in many, many different things. They can invest in, new lines of equipment that'll help produce, more products. They can invest in their people. They can invest in new facilities or expanding the facility they have. So why solar? So this is a question that I go through with business owners all the time. Well, first of all, energy is a commodity that is going to be purchased by the family business owner one way or the other. It's not like if you don't have solar, that gets, you don't have to spend the money and you're going to be purchasing the energy. But there's some dramatic and fantastic incentives in the state of New Jersey, which is why many business owners have seen, and yourself, why have you seen so many calls coming in from solar developers like myself? It's because it's very lucrative. It's very, very financially doable in New Jersey. And that's what my talk is going to be on today. I think everybody realizes that solar energy is very good for the planet. It's sustainable, it's green, but it has to be financially affordable. And the way it evolved in New Jersey was they have something called a renewable portfolio standard, or RPS. So New Jersey has had, what an RPS is, it's a rule that mandates that a certain percentage of all the energy that the utilities in New Jersey provide must come from renewable sources, not oil or coal and gas or nuclear. It has to come from renewable sources such as solar, wind, geothermal, such like that. Now, the utilities can do one of two things. They can either take the money that they charge ratepayers to build all this solar and renewable, and they could build it themselves. And then they could point to those installations and say, see here, I've met the requirement. But what they've chosen to do is to create jobs and to, for the benefit of the communities, is they've taken those incentives and they've said, any business owner that installs solar will pay you incentives to do it. And then you can own it, and then you report into us. Through the New Jersey Clean Energy Program, they track everything that these systems put out. And I think you'll find in New Jersey that, the paybacks on solar can be, let's say, anywhere from 3.5 to 4.5 years, depending on the size, typically. But after it's paid off, with this reliable energy, those dollars roll in, and now you're turning what used to be an expense into a revenue source for the company.
Interesting.
So that's the financial end of it.
So what size business? So say we're a restaurant and we own our building and we have a roof. Is there a size limit, or is there an optimal size, or if businesses are listening, and they said, I'd love to learn more, how big do they have to be?
That's a fantastic question. A lot of people call in, they say, how much is solar and what will it provide me? What are the benefits and the cost and payback? But solar is a truly customized technology. We look at the roof and we see what we can fit up there, and that's typically where I start. But business owners can install as little or as much solar as they choose. So even if you have a warehouse that has a huge roof, it's very important that the solar installer or developer do a few things. There's a lot of nuances that they really should be explaining to every business owner. I think you had asked me in a prior call, what should people look for in a good installer?
Right.
I think, integrity and honesty and no assumptions and covering all the bases for every single client is so important. So a typical size system that I have been providing for New Jersey businesses is somewhere in the range of 500 kilowatts. Okay. We talked about 1 kilowatt. Well, that's 500 kilowatts. But then I always look at the energy bills, always, and see what it is they're providing, because we don't want to oversize a system ever, for that. And the New Jersey policies dictate that as well. So whether it's a restaurant or a large warehouse, we look at the bill, we see what we can fit on the roof, and then we try to marry the two together and at least give them typically maybe a 30 or 40% portion of that energy.
So now what about size? Now the 500 kilowatts doesn't mean anything to the average person, but what size roof, or is there a square footage, a 4,000 square foot building? I don't know. Does it matter?
Well, every kilowatt we install takes up, let's say, roughly 100 square feet.
Okay.
So if you think about a residential system, most homeowners have a roof. A lot of homeowners may have a roof facing south it's about 500 square feet, maybe. Okay. So in a business, that could be several thousand square feet.
Right.
But even so, it's typically a portion of their overall roof. But we just do what we can.
Right. So I mean, this is really fascinating. So they begin to own, part of that. So one of the other things is, and we're going to take a break in a little bit, but I want to talk about the quality of the roof. One of the questions is, do I need to have just done my roof before you do that? If my roof is old, if it needs, and so we're going to take a short commercial break, but I want you to think about that, and we'll come back, and because I get that question a lot. It says, my roof's up for repair, or I just had it repaired, what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. So we're going to go to commercial break, and we'll be right back with Joe Gordon.
130 miles of beautiful beaches, solid rock, and everything in between.
Look in the window.
Now that's New Jersey. Plan your New Jersey trip at visitnj.org. Waves of fun. Nights of excitement. And a trail of memories. Now that's New Jersey.
Welcome back to Family Business World. I'm your host, Dr. Dale Caldwell, with Joe Gordon, who's schooling me on all the ins and outs of solar and why solar is so important for family and independent businesses. So before the break, Joe, we were getting at, what kind of qualities does the roof have to be? Should you have just done your roof, or talk to me about, about that?
Right, and thanks, Dale, because that's so important. That's one of those areas where I said a solar installer needs to be in full integrity. I've had lots of family business owners interested, but if the roofs are appreciably older than, let's just say, 8 to 10 years, depending on the quality of the membrane, typically that's not a good situation. Because the last thing we want to do is put solar on an older roof, capture the incentives, but then let's say they go to change out the roof in 10 years, whereas the solar is going to last 30 years. They change the roof in 10 years. We have to remove the solar, re-roof, and put it back.
Right.
Now, that's not an impossible expense. That can be done. But then now we're talking about something that takes away from the economics that the family business owner was expecting. So we look for roofs that are fairly new. That's the best ones.
Well, I would imagine that solar actually helps the life of the roof too, because it's covering a lot of the roof. Does it? Is that been shown to do that? Because it's protecting the roof in a way.
It does protect the roof. That's an excellent point. I just don't factor that in. I mean, there's other areas of the roof that the solar. The south sun is the harshest sun that we have. All day long, and it's baking down, and it dries out the membrane. That's what affects the membrane the most. But there is some solar that can get in between the panels and around the panels. So for the overall life of the roof, we just prefer putting it on roofs that, like I said, are about 8 to 10 years old, is about the oldest you may want to look at it. And also, you mentioned something earlier. It's very important. There's a couple different financial ways that owners can have solar. It's important that for either one of them, that they own the facility.
Right.
The reason, so one of them is a owner can purchase a system outright. Now, that's going to be the best and most lucrative way to own solar financially. However, it does require that they have the resources to pay for it. The government incentives and the state incentives will then pay them back for it. But there's another way to do it. So if they own the building, they obviously are not going to make an improvement on a building that they've leased and may not be there. But there's another way that you might have heard of in all that you've looked at, which is called a power purchase agreement, or a PPA. And it's where a company like Sunvest would buy the system, operate it over a period of, let's say, 15 to 25 years, and then we would sell the electricity to the building owner. So they would get an electric rate that is far lower than what they're paying currently. But so now they don't have any ownership, they don't have any operation or maintenance responsibilities, and they do get a good benefit from eliminating a great portion of their electric rate. However, it's not going to be as lucrative as owning it yourself.
Owning it yourself. So one of the things we talked about before, and I know you're focused on commercial, but you have experience in every aspect of solar, is it seems like I'm getting all these spam calls about solar. In addition to car maintenance and solar seem to be the two things. And so, how does the consumer know if it's a scam? If it's provide some information for the viewers on how to protect themselves.
That's a good point. Well, what you need to do to disseminate is in what they say. So being in integrity with somebody is not just talking about how great it is, but what I do is I show independent, verifiable sources for what I'm saying. So, for example, if they say, hey, this solar array on your home or business is going to eliminate, let's just say, a 500 kilowatt array we talked about earlier in terms of a typical average. That's going to generate, according to New Jersey weather, and is going to generate somewhere around 600,000 kilowatt hours a year. Well, how do I know that? Well, I can show a document from a website called PV Watts, which is a web-based estimator run by the National Renewable Energy Labs out of Colorado. It's a government think tank that has designed a model that bakes in 50 years of historical weather data into that model. And we can show in New Jersey how that system would perform in the long term. Some years you do better, some years worse. But another certification that is really good for homeowners to look for is called NABCEP. Everything's an acronym now, right?
Right, yeah.
That stands for North American Board of Certified Energy Practitioners.
Okay.
And it's a gold standard certification that the installer has been trained in best practices and the safest practices with solar installation.
Right. So are there specific questions? So next time I get a call about solar, and I understand that. So let's talk about New Jersey, though people across the country will see this. So the PSE&G, the largest supplier, is, as you said, allowing people to use solar, or how does that work? And then I want to, see if we can get some questions that people can ask to really kind of weed out the fraud. So yeah, what are the utilities doing with solar for average people?
Yeah, for homeowners as well, what they do is it's so important to have take care of what I call the showstoppers. For example, Sunvest offers a contingency contract. So what we do is there's a lot of things that need to happen in order for a homeowner or a business to have solar. There's some risks out there.
Right.
If we're going to have an agreement together, I'm going to have to mitigate and minimize those risks for my business owners, clients. So the first thing is interconnection. It's not a given. PSE&G, what they do is they track everybody who's getting on the grid. They have to measure the backfeed. So we would apply for interconnection right off the bat. What happens if they get this particular site is saturated with solar all around it and they can't have solar? Well, PSE&G may say, look, either you can't do it, or what you'll have to do is pay for an upgrade to the local feeder transformer, and that might cost you $50,000 or $100,000. If you'd like to do that, we're happy to allow the solar.
Wow.
That would be a showstopper, and then we would walk away from it, but at no cost to the client.
Right.
Another piece of it is we need to line up those incentives before we move forward, and we must apply for them. And PSE&G would be aware of that. So we would do those two things off the bat.
Right.
The third contingency is structural engineering, for the roof and getting a permit.
Okay. And so when we look at the new opportunity, Jersey Central Power and Light is the other big provider here. Is there a way to monitor what they're charging to really, solar aside, just to really look to know? I mean, how does the consumer, how does the small business person, how does the family business person really know they're being charged, what they should be charged?
Right. So we do a very careful utility bill analysis, and we pull out only those rates that solar can impact.
Right.
And this is a fantastic point. If you're paying, let's say a business owner is paying $10,000 in a given month, and they use 100,000 kilowatt hours, you might think logically, well, then solar can save me about 10 cents a kilowatt hour. But honestly, there are fees on that bill that solar will not touch. There are demand capacity fees.
Okay.
The solar will only impact the volumetric fees on that bill. So if I go through 100,000 kilowatt hours, I look through the bill and I find any rate that is multiplied by 100,000, and that's what solar will impact. So that all factors in. Another thing that the owner can realize is they get a monitoring. Every solar system comes with a revenue grade meter that does a very, very accurate way of monitoring everything coming out of that solar array. And then they can compare that to what their bills are showing.
Right.
And then they can see, yes, this solar array is decreasing my bills, maybe not straight across, but depending on our variable source of energy month to month. And over the year, we look at it at the end with a review and say, yes, this solar has performed in the range that we expected through PV watts.
Right.
So you're getting your money's worth.
Well, you're an expert, obviously on solar, but really even these utility bills. How does someone know, just generally, who do you go to? If you think your utility bill, just generally, forget solar or anything, is there a group that you can go to question your bill? Do you know? And maybe it varies in different states. I know you're all over the country. What advice do people have? Because they may find out that they're being ripped off by the utility provider, and that may push them to use solar.
Well, I think the best thing they can do is people do, particularly family business owners. I know as a residential, I have solar on my own home, and I'm a residential user, and I never really look at my bills very much. I mean, but business owners are very savvy. I know family business owners that constantly compare what's going on with their energy usage. They track it, they look at and every couple of years they get bids for contracts from other suppliers. So I think that's something that you can do to make sure that first of all, you're right. We want to pay a fair rate for the electricity. And then we can look at what the solar offsets and make sure it's doing its job. But New Jersey has such great policies For we talked about that the RPS, or the Renewable Portfolio Standard. Right now, New Jersey is 7th in the country in installed solar. I have an interesting statistic. So New Jersey has installed to date 3.5 gigawatts of solar. Now, what does that really mean to the average person? I can't even visualize that much solar. So I looked online, and I find that it can offset enough solar for the populations of the following cities: Newark, New Jersey, Newark, Jersey City, Patterson, Elizabeth, Toms River, Clifton, Trenton, Camden, Passaic, Union City, Bayonne, East Orange, and half of Vineland. You can take the population from all of those cities, and literally they're grid free.
Wow.
So New Jersey has done an amazing job with solar, and I think the electric utilities have been a real champion and they've done a very good job working with the consumers on that.
Wonderful. So let's talk about the Delran School. I think you have some information about the Delran School. You want to say some things about that before we end?
Yeah, the Delran School is a great. It ties into all your questions about what can fit on a roof, and there's other options. So the Delran School District had a bid that was actually before I came to Sunvest.
Right.
I believe it was in 2016.
Okay.
And we won that bid, and we installed all the solar. You can see a great deal of it at the high school. There's a great deal of rooftop solar.
So here's a picture of it. A picture just came up. A picture of the school came up with the beautiful solar.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can also see, I believe it's to the west. You can see all the ground mount arrays. So let's say a business owner doesn't want to put solar on the roof. If they own grounds around it, that's a very viable option.
Right.
We've even done hybrid systems with some on the roof and some on the ground, and we pipe it all back to the distribution panel.
Wow. It actually looks really nice.
That's a 2 megawatt array. I'm sorry.
It looks really nice, actually. It really is not the eyesore, that you think that, that, this is going to look horrible, but it really is. And I'm seeing it more and more places are doing it. Now, are you looking for warehouses? It seems like warehouse roofs would be the perfect place to do this. Is that true? Is a flat roof the ideal place?
Flat roofs are fairly ideal. There, many facility directors have questioned me. Like they said, "You're not putting holes in my roof, are you?" They call it their roof.
Right.
And I totally understand that. So with commercial arrays, typically a flat roof is the least expensive. We ballast it. So on those roofs that you see at Delran, there are no penetrations. Everything is weighed down to the local wind codes.
Wow.
It passed permit inspection, right? So that's important, and so we can just ballast it, and then we pipe the energy in, and it's very viable, very non-intrusive to the facility.
Well, Joe, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm hoping that some of our listeners are going to reach out if they want to contact you. What's your web address, or how should they reach you? How can they reach you?
Yeah, please reach out to me. I'm happy to answer any questions whatsoever. This is the consulting. It's J Gordon. That's JGORDON at Sunvest with a V. Some people think it's Sunwest, but Sunvest with a V.com.
Perfect. Great. Joe, thank you. Thank you so very much. And I want to thank the audience, Family Business World, for watching, and we will see you next week. Take care.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you so much.